strategy develops, we will continue to consult with Congress, and I do think that it'll be important for Congress to weigh in, and or that our consultations with Congress continue to develop, so that the American people are part of the debate. But I don't want to put the cart before the horse. We don't have a strategy yet.
That, of course, was the president speaking yesterday with words that are the news today, folks. They are impacting the world over. Yet today, the White House seemed to be backpedaling during the daily press conference where Josh Earnest, the press secretary, assured reporters that the White House did, in fact, have a comprehensive strategy. Anybody know what's going on? Welcome back to the show. I'm Rick Unger, filling in for Steve Malzberg, who's off for a couple of days for some well-deserved R&R. I'm joined in this segment by LIGNET chief analyst Fred Fleitz and the CEO and founder of Redmine Solutions, Frank Wuco. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us on this Labor Day holiday weekend.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
There they are. So let's start with you, Fred. What's up? I mean, you think the president really has no strategy and is maybe up to some different agenda here? What do you think is going on here?
Well, I think this was a gaffe by the president. I think he has a strategy. I think it's the wrong one. It appears that he wants to first stabilize Iraq before taking action. When he says there's no strategies to take on ISIS, I don't think that's true. The Pentagon always has strategies for contingencies like this. The thing is, the president's backing away from a confrontation with ISIS at exactly the wrong time, when I think we need to be strong.
Well, I mean, is that really what's happening? You know, you kind of say that he's focusing on Iraq, and I see your point there. But at the same time, we know they're already flying surveillance planes over Syria. They're already looking for targets. So can you really say that he's not looking to something in Syria in the relatively near future? Frank, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that as the other gentleman said, I mean, there are always plans on the table. There are always strategies and campaign plans that are being constantly refreshed and looked at. And from the standpoint of the intelligence collection, drone flights, things of that nature, intelligence collection, perhaps not as intense as it is right now over Syria, is another thing that is sort of continuously happening. But who knows what is happening behind the scenes, regardless of the president's apparent incompetence and just in the words that he's choosing to use. The military is a large and relatively effective bureaucracy, and one would expect that there's a lot of action going on right now in the Pentagon and at U.S. Central Command headquarters, preparing for any contingency.
Yeah, I think what Fred said was interesting, noting that this might have just been a gaffe, because it is somewhat hard to believe that there are no strategies being planned and underway. Fred, some of the theories that have developed since yesterday are maybe the president was sending a message to both our allies and other countries in that region saying, look, our strategy is as much dependent on you as it is on our airplane cover. You guys better get on board, and get on board quick, because we don't have a strategy until you're part of it. You think that's a realistic way to take a look at this, Fred, or is that just people trying to cover?
I don't know, Rick, that sounds a little far-fetched to me. And I was very concerned today when the spokesman, Earnest, at the White House tried to say that the president doesn't have a strategy because the Pentagon hasn't provided him with one yet.
Yeah, that's a little odd, isn't it? I've noticed that too, and I don't think any of us actually believe that. And maybe like yourself, it made me a bit more nervous, because you know that the Pentagon had a strategy there an hour before the president had asked it to be delivered. So that seems a bit odd, I agree. Frank, what do you say to people who would argue today that, you know what, the government has known about ISIS for a year now anyhow? What do you say to those who suggest that we should have had a strategy to deal with them, well, going back 6 months, if not a year? Are they right?
They're absolutely right. I mean, we have been at this now post 9/11. I mean, we're going on 14 years dealing with this enemy. Perhaps not ISIS per se, but an enemy that is determined along the same sort of theological apocalyptic
except
timeline.
I'm going to jump in to say this. They are different. We have not seen a terrorist group that is as well-funded, well-organized, as militarily put together as ISIS is. So do you really think we could have foreseen this going back 6 months or a year?
Absolutely. It was foreseen. I can assure you that it was foreseen. That there would be groups or a group that would follow in the footsteps and in the path of Al-Qaeda. If Al-Qaeda and groups like it were not sort of completely rendered ineffective after 9/11, which they certainly were not. So this was an absolutely foreseeable event. Syria has been left completely unchecked. Activity inside of Syria has been left completely unchecked. Has been nothing but a massive Sunni Islamic armed force that has been taking on the Syrian government, and that is IS. We've been watching this play out for the last 3 years.
But Fred, how do you react to, it was only a year ago today, actually yesterday, I think, when we were seriously contemplating getting involved in Syria, as we all recall, the Red Line, etc. What would it have meant if we had gotten involved in Syria against Assad, on the same side as it was with ISIS, and here we would be a year later suddenly having to come to some kind of an arrangement with Assad to go after ISIS? How awkward would that have been? Would it have made any sense at all?
Well, this is a complicated question, Rick. If we had bombed Assad last year, and I'm not sure that that was a good idea, we don't necessarily know that would have helped ISIS. Part of the reason ISIS has been able to make gains in Iraq is because we weren't providing arms to the Maliki regime, because we were waiting for that regime to be shored up. Now, I don't know what we would have done with Iraq if we had attacked Syria. I think there's a lot of moving pieces here.
And do you think that maybe the president's critics were a bit harsh on him for that reason, going back a year?
Well, I mean, I'm actually sympathetic to the president's hesitancy to provide weapons to the Syrian rebels, because I don't know whether they're going to form an Islamist government. I don't know whether there really are moderate rebels in Syria. And I think the president's hesitancy on that score has been legitimate. What I fought him with is not intervening in Syria early on, when we might have made a difference before the Islamists got a hold on the country.
Okay, I see. Frank, interesting comparison of styles and maybe substance today. Today we saw the Prime Minister Cameron over in the United Kingdom raise the terrorist level for his country. We saw last week that he rushed back from vacation after just 1 day when he discovered that a Brit had been involved in the execution of our photojournalist who tragically died there last week. And we see the president, setting aside the vacation stuff, which I personally think is overdone, but we see him come out yesterday and make a fairly soft statement, noting that we don't yet have a strategy. Are these differences between the Prime Minister of the UK and our president, are they optics or are they substantive?
No, these are real differences. I mean, British society, British culture, as they say, despite the fact that we're separated by a common language, is quite different from ours, as is the British legal system with regards to policing activities and security inside of the UK. Don't forget, the British faced a long militant and terrorist struggle with the IRA inside the borders of their own country for decades. So they know very well what it's like to have this sort of menace within your proximity. I mean, shopping malls and subway stations in the UK have been blown up in the past, and then there was the July 1st attack by Al-Qaeda a few years ago. So the Brits don't mess around with this, and when they very quickly revealed the identity of the British ISIS member that decapitated the American journalist, this was probably a very early and powerful projection by the British government to Islamist militants inside their country that they are under watch. And
right,
the
so
Brits simply
let me
play
sneak
by
in
a
this
different
one
card.
Let me, in the short time we have left, I want to sneak in one question because I want you both to answer it quickly. Fred, you're a veteran of the CIA. If you had to come up with the strategy that our government should be following to get rid of this scourge that we now call ISIS, how would you do it? Real quick.
I think the president has to meet with his supporters, Democrats in Congress, and tell them bombing in Syria may be necessary, and probably commandos both in Syria and Iraq to take out ISIS positions.
Meaning American boots on the ground, not just backing the Kurds.
American and hopefully some of our allies.
Right. Frank, what would your response be? What would your strategy be to deal with this?
Well, ISIS being a very purist Islamist militant organization, they play by one set of rules, and those are the rules found in the Quran, the Hadith, and Sharia law. Those rules dictate to them that that you fight on the ground, you win, you're victorious, or you're not. And as long as you're victorious, not being stopped, God is in your favor.
Guys, thanks. Interesting, a little bit slightly different approaches. Fred Fleitz, CEO of LIGNET, and Frank Wuco, CEO and founder of Red Mind Solutions. Guys, thanks for joining. Have a great weekend. Coming up next, the very best of Gimme 5.